Ah, we're live. Are you recording? Okay, for the channel. We have 78 minutes. Say hi for the camera.
You've amended it twice.
How's it going?
Okay.
Yeah.
And since there's no pictures are allowed, just the people that are authorized. Next thing, if no pictures are allowed, please just the people that are authorized.
Does anyone see them? Alicia. Yes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be commencing in a few minutes. There's just one or two technicals that are just being sorted, and we will commence very soon. So thank you for your patience. We're on the way very soon. Okay, I think we're almost there. Waiting for the thumbs up. Thank you all so much for your patience. We are moments away from starting. Ladies and gentlemen, despite one or two technical hiccups with the video systems, we are going to start the session, and it's a very warm welcome to the Palace of Nations here in Geneva as we introduce our side event, Human Rights Violations and the Rise of Islamic Extremism in Bangladesh, part of the 58th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council 2025. My name is Kev Lawrence and I will be the moderator today. I visited Bangladesh back in 2023 as part of a media team hosting a Commonwealth Investment Summit. I found the country to be warm and welcome and very hospitable, a country rich in history and heritage, a country with ambition, wishing to open its doors to grow its trade with other Commonwealth countries. Then we think of Bangladesh today. What we see now is a country in huge transition, with alarming reports of violence, persecution, and a breakdown in the rule of law. And this is what we will explore today. I would like to stress that the session today, we have no wish to be political. We are not here to discuss the previous regime or the current regime. This is a discussion about its people. The aim of our session today is to shine a spotlight on the many reports that have surfaced in newspapers, on social media, and from the first-hand experiences witnessed by a select few journalists of human rights abuses that are occurring right now in Bangladesh. Reports of violence, beatings, killings, random arrests, a denial of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, particularly to minority groups. Now we have a distinguished panel of guests, each of whom will spend time sharing their thoughts and insights. And then we will finish the session with some questions to the panelists from the floor. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and if I select you, then please ask your question. Let me introduce our panel. Our chair is Mr. Fazla Rahman Afridi. He is an activist and human rights defender and principal representative from the Temuco Development and Cultural Union. Dr. Rayan Rashid is a human rights lawyer, advocate and legal consultant for Oxford Matrix and trustee of the International Crimes Strategy Forum. Ms. Zahar Zand is an award-winning investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker specializing in foreign affairs and human rights violations. Now, earlier this year, Zahar published a two-part podcast documentary called The Plight of Hindus in Bangladesh, and her visit to the country uncovered a harsh reality for many people, and Zahar will discuss what she witnessed firsthand. And our final speaker is Mr. Paul Bristow. Paul is a former Conservative Member of Parliament in the UK. He has served as a committee parliamentary private secretary and as a member of the Health and Social Care Committee. Paul has visited Bangladesh on numerous occasions and is a strong advocate for the protection of human rights. And I would now like to invite the chair, Mr. Fazla Rahman Afridi, to address our session.
Well, thank you very much, Kat Lawrence, our moderator. It's a privilege to welcome and express our gratitude to everyone, including our distinguished panel of guests. Today's keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Bristow, former Conservative MP, Ms. Zahar Zand, prominent investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker who also exposed violence on minorities from on ground, risking her life, and Dr. Rayan Rashid, advocate and legal consultant. Oxford Matrix to our side, even that will brought to light to harrowing accounts of rights abuses, including religious persecution, weaponization of law enforcement and judiciary, extrajudicial killing, and massed arrest of dissenters, affecting millions of people in Bangladesh, but still remain grabbed with meticulous denial and ignored by the international community and global media. This side event is an effort to shed light on the least discussed but the alarming and meteoric rise in past 7 months of extremists who are enjoying free reign in Bangladesh and vow to destroy pluralism, leaving a devastating imprint on lives of millions who believe in tolerance and pluralism, seek to live in harmony, stand for equal rights for its 175 million people, half of which are women, while the syncretic culture of the country has been under siege and dissenters are silenced by gruesome rights abuses. Distinguished moderator, the overwhelming optimism and hope by world leaders on reform schemes, spearheaded by the interim led by Yunus have fizzled out in past 7 months, as since August 5, the nation consisting around 175 million people witnessed mob violence, replaced rule of law, religious persecution engulfs minorities, jungle rule dominates judiciary, a staggering millions of female populace under siege, and have been reeling from violence and intimidation from emboldened Islamists, while extrajudicial killing, targeted violence including arson, mass arbitrary arrests of opposition activists. Also, I would like to assert something along the lines of local media being gagged, and any journalist who dare to try and shed light on the actual situation are being branded as conspirators and being harassed by weaponized justice system. With these opening remarks, I thank everyone and wish all the best for this side event. Mr. Thomas.
Chair, thank you very much for those opening remarks. Now, before we hear from our panellists, I would invite everybody to watch the documentary that's been prepared for this side event.
How Dr. Yunus assured the world and the nation of reform scheme where inclusivity and equality, let alone fundamental human rights, would be upheld. All these tall claims were made during a speech by Yunus on August 8th upon his return to Bangladesh before taking oath as interim head without winning any election. And from UN to other international rights bodies also backed Yunus' regime and the quest for so-called reform process unanimously. International human rights activists, organizations, politicians, lawyers, journalists raised their concern from the very beginning that Yunus's interim government didn't pay attention to this concern.
Given the current instability in Bangladesh and since the departure of the former Prime Minister in August, this is a moment of deep concern. Many governments are condemning the violence and calling for peace and law and order to be restored.
But 7 months under the rain, a reality check reveals just the opposite scenario, with law and order when totally collapsed, while the judiciary and law enforcement have been totally weaponized. Mob rule has become the rule, with lynching, communal violence, alongside other acts of terror like arson, looting, rape, curb on freedom of movement for women and girls roiled the nation. Let's take a look at how rights abuses exacerbated in the country, extrajudicial killing and custodial death by law enforcement. Since August 5th, at the behest of Bangladesh Army, joint forces have been deployed. Troops are also empowered with magistracy power and following our monthly status of killing under law enforcement. Atrocities against minorities.
We have a responsibility because we enable Bangladesh to be free and independent. Now, whatever the change of government has been in Bangladesh, it cannot be acceptable that religious minorities are persecuted in this way.
Attacks on followers of Sufis and shrines. Islamists inciting violence against minorities, in stark contrast to government's narrative on ruling out communal line over attacks against minorities. BBC journalist laid bare how Islamists, released after August 5th, are inciting ongoing spate of violence, targeting all minority communities, including Hindus. 2 episodes in BBC radio service brings to light the stark involvement of Islamists in fomenting attacks against minorities. Yunus's sweeping indemnity for mass killing of cops, citizens, and violent attacks on police stations by loyalists. In contrast to the pledge to ensure justice, an order issued on October 14th, 2024 by Yunus reads, students and citizens who put forth all efforts to make this uprising August 8th. Emboldened at the indemnity, advocates of Yunus regime, radical Islamists and coordinators from student against discrimination platforms publicly glorified the killing spree of cops and planned destruction of key public offices as part of a violent campaign to bring down Awami League.
যদি মেট্রো রেলে আগুন না দেওয়া হতো, যদি পুলিশদেরকে না মারা হতো, তাহলে বিপ্লবটা তো সহজেই অর্জিত হতো না কিংবা
পুলিশের ফায়ার যদি কম হয়েছে, সিভিলিয়ান ড্রেসে হাতে 7.6 আমরা নিয়ে গেছি।
বৈষম্য বিরোধী আন্দোলনে সিরাজগঞ্জে এরপরে যদি 15 বছর পুলিশ নিহত না হতো, বাংলাদেশের পুলিশের মেরুদণ্ড থাকতো না।
Despite such public admission of killing, the decree justifying no legal action against violence perpetrated by supporters of Yunus has been likened by rights activists as an act of widespread indemnity granted for perpetrators who killed police, minorities, citizens affiliated with Awami League, aimed to bring Yunus in power and solidify his grip on power. No justice for killing of at least 318 people under Yunus regime. Ayin O'Shalish Kendra, a leading human rights organization, reported. Massacre of Awami League activists. At least 171 citizens were reportedly killed in form of lynching, arson, and other forms of violence. According to accounts of family members, tens of thousands of party activists and leaders in almost each unit of 4,573 union in all the 64 districts across the country subjected to physical attacks, and their houses and business were looted and vandalized. Hundreds of activists are feared, killed as their whereabouts are unknown for months. Due to impunity for killing of Awami League leaders and activists, there has been no let-up in the extrajudicial killing spree even after 6 months. Rather, the cycle of vengeance and erosion of rights only compounded. Violence against women, safety of female population, from clothing to workplace and movement, under siege and culture of impunity to uphold freedom of press emerged out as biggest hoax in 6 months, as not only journalists are suppressed with meticulous design of false lawsuits, arbitrary arrests, unlawful incarceration, but also a record number of headquarters of media outlets came under attacks. Since August 5th, offices of at least 19 media outlets are torched and vandalized, highest since the country's history, according to DW Bangla Service. Mass arrests and arbitrary detention, brutal crackdown. At least 13,540 people were subjected to mass arrests and arbitrary detention from August 2024 till January 2025. In 20 days of February, at least 12,500 were detained in political cases. No justice in court, victims of mass arrests denied of legal rights. Reports reveal critics of Yunus regime who have been subjected to mass arrests were attacked inside court premises on a regular basis. Denial of academic rights of students. Over the space of last 6 months, tens of thousands of students who were opposed to Yunus and his allies were attacked inside campuses, even barred from attending examinations, denied of academic rights, and their certificates have been cancelled by university authorities. Only because of political belief or alignment with Awami League's student wing, scores of students were murdered, abducted from their home, and even thrown behind the bars. Now the questions over Yunus gaining undue privileges to expand business empire.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Dr. Rayan Rashid, who is a human rights lawyer, to address this session.
Distinguished audience, just a few weeks ago, in a quiet village in Bangladesh, a young girl was raped. Her father, seeking justice for his daughter, went to the police. Days later, he was murdered by the very men he had accused of harming his daughter. There is this haunting image of that girl standing by her father's grave. She is not crying, she is simply staring, as if asking, should I now seek justice for what was done to me or for what was done to my father? These are the impossible questions being asked by young hearts in today's Bangladesh. I speak to you as a witness and as a chronicler who has documented Bangladesh situation since August 2024. I speak to you as someone who believes institutions such as these must act when justice is under threat, because inactions carry consequences. Since 8th August, under the leadership of Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Muhammad Yunus, Bangladesh has entered a period of alarming human rights decline. Attacks on religious and ethnic minorities, Hindus, Christians, Sufis, Ahmadiyyas have intensified. Transgender and LGBT communities have faced rising hostility. Political opposition, journalists have been silenced, detained, or forced into hiding. Political space and freedom of expression are shrinking. These are not isolated events. They are part of a wider pattern of intimidation, of impunity, and of fear. Lawyers, judges, and even accused individuals have been attacked, including in court premises. The judiciary is increasingly seen as under executive pressure. Trust in the justice system is fading. Mob violence continues, sexual violence skyrocketed. Hundreds of convicts, including those charged with terrorism, have been released. Before that, over 450 police stations have been attacked. Weapons looted from these stations are now with extremist groups. While some investigations may be underway, few have resulted in transparent prosecutions. Impunity appears systemic. Yet, Dr. Yunus-led interim government continues to deny and dismiss these claims. Dr. Yunus himself claimed these are all propaganda, these are all disinformation. But Dr. Yunus is no ordinary political figure. He carries a global image, a Nobel Peace Laureate, a reformer, a man above reproach. At least that's what the world thinks of him. This lends his denials a weight that obscures the truth. Clearly, moral prestige does not equal moral infallibility. We have seen that now. On the other hand, the Office of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights conducted an inquiry, but that has been widely criticized for its flawed methodology, bias, and a form of networked capture. It is seen not as a neutral investigation, but as a report shaped by narrow range of voices aligned with those in power today. International civil society actors has also fallen short. Some organizations have indeed spoken, but too late and too little. Many of us reached out in good faith, but we were met with silence. If facts are judged by who delivers them, truth becomes negotiable. So today I make 3 calls. First, that all alleged human rights violations, past and present, be investigated independently and impartially. Second, that the United Nations conduct a full internal review into the OHCHR's inquiry, its process, its findings, and networks of influence. And third, that the United States Congress hold a hearing into allegations of previous US administration's interference in the regime change of Bangladesh. Distinguished delegates, we have seen this before in Indonesia, Iran, and in Syria too. Let us not add Bangladesh to that list. That young girl, standing by her father's grave, is no longer just a victim. She has become a metaphor for today's Bangladesh. Violated, bereaved, unheard, but still standing, still waiting. Let the world not look away. Let's not fail her. Let the world not fail the people of Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryan Rashid, human rights lawyer. We move now to our next panelist for her remarks, the award-winning investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker, Miss Zahar Zand. Zahar.
Thank you very much, and that was really powerful. What you said, I really felt that frustration and pain and sorrow with my own eyes once in Bangladesh. Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for attending and listening. This is very important and sadly overlooked in the world with everything that's happening. Nevertheless, it's very important that innocent people's lives and the future of a huge nation is in danger. So it's important for us to be having these kind of discussions and keeping it alive. As a part of my job, I have traveled to so many countries. I've reported from over 40 countries around the world, including Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Nicaragua, and what I saw happening in Bangladesh is terrifying, scarily similar to what I've seen happen in these countries, especially post-revolution. Often with revolutions, people think that the first thing to do is to get rid of the big enemy. They unite, they come together. In this instance, for many people, it was Sheikh Hasina. They got rid of her. And now, they didn't seem to think about what happens after. And now, all of these little groups are forming, which is really scary. Now, I went to Bangladesh end of September, early October in 2024, shortly after the outset of Sheikh Hasina's government after student-led protests. I went there because I was keeping an eye on the news, and the whole world was watching. People, students were protesting, they were getting attacked on the streets, and the world was suddenly paying attention. But when the government was ousted and I went there, it was extraordinary. Walking around the streets, I could see graffitis, murals on the walls about the success, about the sacrifices made by so many people who risked their lives. And speaking to activists, to journalists on the ground, they were happy. They felt like for the first time in a very long time they could speak openly without censoring themselves. And it was impossible to miss the hope in people's faces, in people's eyes. You could see that they were hopeful for a better future for their country, so that all of the sacrifices they made wasn't for nothing. But beneath that hope, something very sinister was shining, like you couldn't ignore it. It was simmering beneath the surface, which brings me to why I went to Bangladesh in the first place. After the outset of the Sheikh Hasina's government, loads of videos, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, started flooding social media. First, it was people attacking the houses, the offices of people who were a part of the Awami League. People didn't care. They thought they were a part of the corruption, a part of what many people fought for. We don't care. But then we started getting reports and videos of normal people, citizens, their houses getting attacked. New York Times was one of the first publishers that actually published a very good report about how these attacks are towards a lot of the minorities, including the Hindus and the LGBT community. But the Hindus is very interesting because attacks against them has kind of been intertwined with Bangladesh's history since the formation of Bangladesh. And it's been intensifying recently, but then after the revolution, most of them were getting attacked, or at least there were reports of it. And then the BBC did another report about a teacher having been attacked, and so on and so forth. And suddenly the world was like, what is going on? And of course, the outrage in the Hindu majority neighboring India was palpable. But they started, the far-right Indian media started releasing a lot of footage, a lot of videos that were fake news. So amongst hundreds of actual legitimate attacks that people in the villages in Bangladesh were posting about what was happening to them, a lot of videos that were fake, that were irrelevant, that were from years ago started emerging. And that irresponsible reporting, a lot of the victims I spoke to on the ground in Bangladesh told me, is the reason that the world started looking away. The BBC did a really great investigation into debunking these fake news. But what they failed to acknowledge is that a lot of these reports of these attacks are legitimate. People are getting attacked. Yes, there is fake news, but then there's also lots of legitimate ones. But after the BBC debunking these videos, Al Jazeera followed. And then other publications followed. And then the world was like, this is a part of the BJP's propaganda, we're not paying it attention. As we all know, it's a very complicated fight they looked at. And that has left many, many people in desperate conditions. I want to start talking about the context. You all know, I'm sure, and there is a lot to read about. I want to talk to you about some of the people I saw and some of the people I spoke to. Can we have the slide of the photos, please? Thank you. These two are two young Hindu students, Banamali and Shrikanta. They're childhood friends, best friends. They grew up in a tiny village. And they were a part of the protest that got rid of the Sheikh Hasina's government. They fought for it, they lost their friends in the revolution. But after these attacks began, first they didn't want to believe it, then Banamali's father, the tall guy, his father's house was attacked. And that's when it hit him, that these attacks are real. Even people in the country wouldn't believe it. When he went back to his village to protect his father, he started seeing with his own eyes. He saw temples getting burned, houses getting burned, people, women, children being attacked. And so these two, along with their friends, gave up everything, gave up their studies, everything, and they made it their life mission to go and document these atrocities so that the world knows. Because the journalists weren't doing it, domestic journalists nor international journalists. And the government, with the policing vacuum, and the interim government wanting to show like they're in control, they weren't really dealing with these attacks properly. So I started following them around the country. Can I see the next slide, please? This house, this was the first village they took me to. This village was enough for me to have seen and witnessed the pain, the videos that people were talking about. 17 houses and 3 temples in this village, in this Hindu majority village, were burned to the ground. This is just one of them. 17 houses. In each house, several families lived together. They had started building some of them, but many of them were abandoned, like this one. The family were so terrified to come back that they had just gone and hid away because they feared their lives, because villagers told me that they're continuing to get threats. They sent their 17-year-old boy there just to be able to fix the place up. And then I went to the neighbor's house. Can I have the next photo, please? This man, this house was his life's work. He had worked all of his life to be able to make this house. 4 or 5 weeks later, look at it. Even his dinner was on the floor, his medicine was on the floor. He was crying. He was like, what do I do? I have no more money to build this. I don't even have the power or energy. This was my life's work. What do I do? Why did they attack us? And he believes it's because they're Hindus. I went to several different of the 17 houses, and interestingly, not every single one of them were Hindus. 2 of them were Muslim families. But they told me they were attacked after giving shelter to their Hindu neighbors. And I challenged them. I was like, I went there skeptical. I was like, how do you know they attacked you because you sheltered them? And they were telling me, they were shouting, you shelter the Hindus, and this is what you're gonna get. We're short on time, so I'm just gonna quickly go through a couple more. Can I see the next one, please? This is, they even burned his temple. You can see he's praying there. And I also went to several different temples, and they said that they're coming off the people's gods. Because in desperate times, can we have the phones of silence, please? This is very distracting. Thank you. Anyway, they told me that they are coming after their gods, because in desperate times you turn to God, but if your gods are attacked, then who do you turn to? Can I see the next one, please? Thank you. This is one of the temple complexes I visited. They had taken the crematorium out of the ground and burnt every single one of the temples within the complex on fire. You couldn't see anything. They had put graffitis, they had burnt a lot of this, they had destroyed it, they had gone out of their way. The people on the ground told me to send a message. Next one. This village, I went there, the night before I got there, a barn had been set on fire. There are some really horrific photos that I'm not able to show you because they're really graphic. People were too scared to even speak to me on the record because they fear that they have no protection. They told me they called the police, but then the police don't come. They called the army, but they're short-staffed. They feel like they've been abandoned. Next. This wasn't supposed to be here. It's too gory. Maybe let's pass it and then I'll tell you about this. Yeah. And finally, I'll tell you about, you can hear about that guy in my report. This woman is the mother, like many other mothers, of young Bangladeshis who feel like they don't have a place left in Bangladesh and they're trying to escape to neighboring India or other countries. And of course, a lot of them end up dead. It's scary. 1 week before I spoke to her, about 10 days, she had lost her 14-year-old son who was so scared of these attacks that he tried to escape. And they found his body on the border a few days later. Now, you can look into why these attacks are happening. It's very complex. I spoke to the police, to the head of one of the heads of the police. He denied that these attacks are religiously motivated. I spoke to several Islamist leaders who all seem to want a Taliban-style rule for Bangladesh. And a lot of them have huge followings on social media. And the victims I spoke to say that it's rhetoric by people like them that is intensifying what they're going through, and people are terrified because of it. Now, meeting victims was so easy. I visited about 9 villages. I spoke to dozens of families who every single one of them scarred in different ways. They've lost their family members, they've had their houses burned to the ground. It was really easy. You could literally go everywhere. But meeting people who admitted to supporting these attacks, or at least taking part in it, was virtually impossible. So I had to get bold. And the 2 young students that I told you took me to a temple complex that used to be a temple complex. And 3 weeks before I arrived there, they had attacked that temple complex, burnt it to the ground, and made a makeshift mosque on top of it. That was the only place I had a chance of speaking to people who might be in support of these attacks. Without me telling you what happened, I'm going to play an audio of when I went to try and speak with them, just to be able to show you the reality on the ground. And I must say, I usually make films. The reason I made this into 2 podcast documentaries is because the subject is so sensitive, people are so scared, that it wouldn't have been possible to capture all of those voices in video. Instead, let's focus on what's happening, what they're saying. Can you please play the audio, please? That desktop is so, that gave me.
There is also another crematorium where a mosque was made by the terrorists.
They made a mosque in a Hindu crematorium.
Yes, and they threat the president and secretary not to go this crematorium. They will kill the president and the secretary.
We arrived in Gorgan village, nestled in Thakurgarh district. Just weeks before, a Hindu crematorium called Gorgan Central stood right here.
This crematorium was used by the Hindus to burn dead body, but the Muslims of this area made a mosque in that place.
In place of the Hindu crematorium now stands a small mosque. Its newly built tin roof and brick walls a stark replacement. Outside, a handful of men linger in conversation. One of them unmistakably dressed as an imam.
I am worrying about our security. That's why I don't want to just risk anyone's life. Yeah.
To avoid inflaming tensions, we park our car a short distance away, taking care to conceal my recording equipment. Banumali, Shrikanta and I wait in the car, while our local producer Sakib cautiously approaches the mosque to gauge if the men are willing to talk.
So I'm inside of the car, and my local fixer, my local producer has stepped outside to speak to the community. Suddenly, out of nowhere, lots of people came, and they're all very, very angry. Emotions are high. So my local producer is currently talking to them. There's a lot of shouting. I'm staying inside of the car for now for our safety.
Within minutes, things escalate. From inside the car, we watch in disbelief as the small group swells into a mob of hundreds. The mood turns menacing. Suddenly, Saqib is being punched and kicked as he scrambles back towards the car. We try to escape, but it's too late. Bricks are jammed under our tires, and our car keys are snatched away, along with our phones. We're stranded. Trapped, we sit frozen inside the car, watching in horror. A few individuals attempt to calm the furious mob, but others press forward, pelting the car with bricks and stones, their shouts dripping with venom. Some spit against the windows. My heart pounds, and then a chilling silence falls over the crowd. We see a group of men carrying a bag. One word cuts through the murmurs. Gasoline.
I think this got cut short, but I'll tell you one thing. 3 hours later, we had sent our coordinates to the authorities. They did come and get us eventually. They were about to set our car on fire. The thing that saved us is out of this mob of about 300, a small proportion of them were trying to protect us. I remember I was in the car and they were trying to drag me out, and I was like, not letting go. Those people saved my life because they knew the car was about to be set on fire. The reason I ended my documentary on this, and I really ask you to go and listen to it, is to show that not everybody in Bangladesh wants the same thing. There is a huge mob mentality going on right now, but just because the majority are acting, or the people with the loudest voices are acting in a certain way, doesn't mean they all want the same thing. And it's a very terrifying time. Just because we're not hearing the voices of victims or people on the ground doesn't mean they're not suffering, doesn't mean they're not screaming for our help. It's because no one is giving them a platform, or they're being silenced. So thank you so much all for being here, and let's keep an eye out and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sahar Zan, for that very powerful speech. We now cross over to our keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Bristow.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think it might just be helpful at the start just to explain why I'm here. So I'm not here to cast judgment on any regime in Bangladesh, either past or present or future. But when I was a Member of Parliament in the UK, obviously my expectation would always be that I would focus on domestic issues. Because of the nature of the constituency I represented, 140 different languages spoken, lots of different people fleeing areas of the world with poor human rights records, I suddenly became someone who spoke quite often about human rights, whether that was in Kashmir, whether it was in Gaza, where I lost my government job for speaking out on Gaza, whether it was being an advocate of the Hazaras, who face persecution in Afghanistan, East Timor, Sudan, and of course, Bangladesh. And human rights have defined my politics ever since. But I've been to Bangladesh, and I just thought it'd be useful just to give my sort of thoughts about what I felt when I went to Bangladesh. There are two sides and two faces on Bangladesh. One is good, 6% growth, year after year in recent years. Made huge strides in taking people out of poverty. Female education, which is, I think, one of the best things we can do in the world right now to relieve suffering. Because female education, educating girls, I mean, a child whose mother can read is 50% more likely to live past the age of 5, and twice as likely to go to school themselves. With just one additional school year, a woman's earnings can increase by up to a fifth. And I saw that in Bangladesh, where huge strides were taken in the education of women. And I also saw the kindness in Bangladesh. One of the biggest human rights disasters, the biggest refugee camp in the world is in Bangladesh, is in Cox's Bazar. The Rohingya refugee camp was the biggest refugee emergency until Syria was there in Bangladesh, and has been there since, well, for a long period of time, 2017, and I've been there myself. I remember seeing, you know, a man who took me around his shelter, told me how proud of very little that he had, and it's worth noting, yes, the work there is supported by the UNHCR, and without them, we would have lots poorer outcomes for refugees from the Rohingya community in Rohingyas in Bangladesh, who of course have fled Myanmar because they're persecuted in Myanmar. But if it wasn't for Bangladesh, those people wouldn't be there. And so when I talk about, so there's two sides of Bangladesh, and that's the kindness of Bangladesh. The other side, of course, is corruption. The other side is using the law as a political weapon rather than reason or argument. And of course, human rights abuses. And these aren't new. These didn't all occur just after August the 5th. But there's a deteriorating security situation going on. And one has to recognise that. Because the questions that I would ask, I've only got a very brief period of time, the questions that I would ask is what happens to the economic growth in Bangladesh that's been there, that's occurred in recent years, if the security situation and human rights situation in Bangladesh doesn't improve? What happens to the rights of minorities in Bangladesh if the security situation and human rights situation doesn't improve in Bangladesh? And what will happen to those women who are being educated in Bangladesh and that progress that's been happening in Bangladesh, and the experience of girls in Bangladesh if the security situation and human rights situation isn't respected and the security situation doesn't improve? And what happens to the Rohingya refugees, over 1 million of them in Cox's Bazar, one of those beautiful parts of Bangladesh you've ever seen? What happens to them if Bangladesh slides into chaos and human rights aren't respected and the security situation isn't improved? So Bangladesh is a country with two sides. Yes, lots of potential, lots of hope, and that hope that was seen by many. Now, as Sahar said on August the 5th, a lot of people did see that beacon of hope from what happened on August the 5th. But that beacon of hope also represented by the potential Bangladesh, the growth that I saw, and the education of girls and women that I saw. What happens to that beacon of hope, a glimmer of light, if the security situation in Bangladesh is allowed to get worse and human rights aren't respected? And that's why this is important. This is discussed today at the UN.
Thank you very much indeed to Mr. Paul Bristow, and I'd like to thank all of our panellists. Now, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're not going to have too much time for questions, but you know, maybe a question or two quickly. If somebody in the room would like to put their hand up, sir, over there, please state your question quickly, and we'll get the panel to comment.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Currently, the situation in Bangladesh is very unstable. Recently, there has been a lot of arrests of innocent businessmen, human rights activists, journalists being arrested unlawfully. There has been a massive increase in underage rape, robbery, and as a British citizen, I feel unsafe and unsecure to travel to my motherland with my family. Law and order at its highest corruption rate. To the panel, when will I feel safe to travel to my motherland again with my family? Thank you very much.
When will I feel safe to travel to my motherland again? You'd need to be brief, but anybody on the panel would like to answer that question? Paul, Sahar, any comments?
I mean, I went there. I didn't particularly feel unsafe. I went there, I didn't particularly feel unsafe, but I am a foreign national and it would have looked very bad for the country if something happened to me. And unfortunately, the attention I got, even though it took about 3 hours and I could have been killed at that time, was a lot quicker than what many people told me they're receiving. I think it's important to remember that it's not about you visiting the country. The problem that people are actually facing there is so much more extreme than that. And we need to really understand how dire the situation is.
Thank you very much. One very quick question, sir.
Today is the 54th Independence Day anniversary for Bangladesh. On this day, West Pakistani forces, along with the local collaborators initiated one of the worst possible genocide in this century. My question to the panel is the world, are we sleepwalking and going back 54 years? Thank you.
Sir, would you like to comment?
Well, I hope not, because when I've been to Bangladesh, the only thing that I saw was potential. But I'm not ignorant. I know there were two sides to Bangladesh. I remember sitting down with the human rights, sitting down with the High Commissioner of Bangladesh back then, and there were issues with human rights. And if that situation is deteriorating, then it's just a huge missed opportunity for Bangladesh, because there is nothing but potential for that country. It can be a significant player in the future. And it's beholden on the international community to protect the rights of those who are being persecuted and to ensure that that potential is realised and we can lift those millions of people out of poverty and educate women and girls, because I think that's a real key to a successful.
And that's where we leave it, and I'm just going to throw to the chair to say thank you and to close the session.
It was really an informative and fantastic side event. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation and contribution. This announced the end of this side event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay,